This video will be going over Chapter 10, Part 2, which discusses the various types of books as well as the business of publishing. Now, when you walk into an average bookstore, what you typically see are called trade books. Trade books are aimed at general readers. These are the ones sold at commercial retail outlets such as Barnes & Nobles or Books A Million. There are many different categories within trade, such as adult, juvenile, comic book, and graphic novels. And trade can encompass many different types of books, such as fiction, nonfiction, biographies, classics, hobbies, art, and travel, self-help, cookbooks. So you can see that trade makes up a large part of the genre of books. And it also generates the most money, over $16 billion in 2018. Here are some of the trade books that I read over summer break, in fact, within just the past month, and highly recommend all of these books, but these are some of the various examples of trade books that I read recently. Now, within trade books are also comic books, and if you're like me, you love comics and graphic novels, but the comic book industry really peaked in 1993, earning more than $850 million in sales. Sorry about that, everyone. Sales of graphic novels actually surpassed comic books in 2016, and they've actually recently seen an increase in 2019 with a spike of 16% increase in sales. Now, one of the main reasons that comic books and graphic novels are so integral to mass communication is that they are heavily adapted for film and TV, making them a large part of media convergence. Even within Marvel's new intro for their movies, they really give a great nod to their history in comic books and graphic novels. So you can see that Marvel is giving a nod there to the evolution from comics to various other types of movies and television about those comic books and graphic novels. Now, mass market paperbacks can be similar to trade books. The primary difference in the mass market paperbacks is that they are smaller and they tend to come out months later than trade. So while they are sold in bookstores, they are not usually the first thing that you see when you walk in. There's usually a paperback section of those trade books. But trade really became an industry to market cheap Western books, crime novels, romance novels, things of that nature. So like those Nicholas Sparks books or the Sweet Magnolias series by Debbie Macomber, those types of things are things you would think of in the mass market paperbacks. So again, a trade book can start out as a trade book, kind of that larger volume, typically hardback, and then move into a more mass marketed form of paperbacks. Now, mass market paperbacks have the smallest profit margin of all book formats because they are just meant to disseminate widely and they're really cheap. Mass market paperback sales actually dropped recently, but there are high convergence rates. You can think of Sweet Magnolias or Nicholas Sparks' The Notebook. They tend to be picked up and turned into either series or romance movies. Another type of book is a professional book. These typically target occupational groups, things like manuals or, books specifically for a certain profession. Those would be considered professional books. Textbooks, on the other hand, are those that are used for educational purposes. One of the first and most widely read is the Eclectic Reader, the McGuffey Reader. It taught spelling and reading simultaneously and was used for many decades in both primary and collegiate education. It's in fact the most widely read secular book, uh, secular meaning non-religious, given that the Bible is the most widely read non-secular book. Now, elementary and high school books were primarily introduced within the 19th century. This is a very large business. Think about the time that you've spent in school prior to college. Think about how many textbooks you had to buy or go through. And so, especially in large states like Texas and California, the adoption of statewide textbooks is a very large market. College textbooks are also very large, and they were primarily introduced in the 1950s, thanks to the GI Bill, where many soldiers needed to be able to access collegiate material regardless of where they were. And so textbooks became a popular form of education. Textbooks are a large industry. However, not a lot of money is actually made off textbooks. In 2018 to 2019, the typical college student spent $492 on textbooks, which is just very sad, but also true. I know that as a PhD student myself. Other types of books are religious books. As I said before, the Bible is the best-selling book of all time. And while the entire genre of religious books is not very profitable, Bibles still continue to be sold very widely, as well as other religious texts such as the Quran, the Torah, and other things like that. Reference books are also very popular. They're another type of book. These are your dictionaries, encyclopedias, atlases, almanacs, but with the introduction of digital forms of reference materials, these are not sold quite as frequently. Now, a university press is the smallest market within the industry. Professors often publish to increase their tenure chances. When I talk about my research and things that I publish, this is what I'm talking about. I usually publish either within small volumes or to an academic journal. And so this is a very specialized audience and why it's a small market. Now, there are many trends within the publishing industry within recent years. Probably the most noticeable, though, is media convergence. It's very rare to have a best-selling novel that is not later adapted for film or television, such as Game of Thrones, or even classics like Little Women. We especially see this in young adult, thanks to J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series, which kind of sparked a renewed interest in YA and fantasy. And so this has become an increasingly popular trend over the past few years. Celebrity book clubs are also very popular within the publishing industry. The first celebrity book club that really made a large impact in terms of television viewers was Oprah's book club, which started when she owned her own talk show. And as she introduced books, people would buy them in the thousands, even millions, to be able to participate in her book club. And it created bestsellers. And so we see that with Reese Witherspoon's book club, and even Jenna Bush Hager has now started one as well. And so you can see how that has really adapted and changed the publishing industry to have a celebrity sponsor. Now, I'm a Harry Potter nerd, you already know that, but Harry Potter actually played a large role in changing the publishing industry in many ways. It was the third most sold book internationally behind the Bible and Mao's Red Book. But besides just being extremely popular, it really changed the way that the industry worked. For instance, you would have never seen midnight release parties for books if it hadn't been for Harry Potter. And as those books gained in popularity, especially after the fourth book, these midnight release parties showed that there can be renewed interest in the brick and mortar bookstore sales, creating large promotions and things of that nature. In addition, the New York Times bestsellers list, which is a very influential list in the publishing industry, actually had to create a children's and young adult list separate from their initial just bestsellers list, because Harry Potter was taking up the top spot every single week. And so other people could not get on the bestseller list. So they actually adapted the bestsellers list at the New York Times to include other different types of genres so that others could be featured, which just speaks to how children and young adult fiction had previously been ignored in the industry. And so the Harry Potter series really showed its ability to sell. And I always like to point out, because it's such an inspiring story, that J.K. Rowling was never meant to have success in publishing. In fact, 12 publishers rejected Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone before a publisher gave her a chance. But even that publisher at the time told her to get a day job because she was not going to make money. Her net worth as of 2012 was over $1 billion. And so always have faith in your own projects and know that you don't have to give up on your dreams just because the industry tells you to. Now, another interesting aspect of Harry Potter culture is the fact that it is such an international sensation. But something to think about is that Harry Potter has a very unique challenge in having to be adapted across languages because of various aspects. So take a look.
In 1997, J.K. Rowling published Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. But most of our audience didn't actually read that book. They read Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, or
Harry Potter à l'école des sorciers,
Harry Potter و سنگ جادو،
Harry Potter y la piedra filosofal.
The bewitching Harry Potter books have reached readers in over 200 territories in over 60 languages. The authorized translations came from separate publishing houses with little oversight from the author. So translators were not only tasked with adapting the text from English into their target languages and cultures, but also making assumptions about Rowling's intentions and translating the spirit of her approach. Their task was particularly challenging because the Harry Potter series is filled with invented words, alliteration, wordplay, and British cultural references.
So as you think about the influence of Harry Potter on publishing industry, consider how global phenomenon will continue to have to adapt to various languages, and how those translators really become gatekeepers, because there's many things that occur within the Philosopher's Stone that are changed for Sorcerer's Stone and things of that nature. So it's just another aspect of the publishing industry that is unique. But as we talk about the importance of media conversion and just the adaptability of books to various genres, just remember the book is always better. Now, a lot of people have claimed that books in their physical form would die out with digital influence. However, ebook sales are slowing. While there was an original spike when Kindle was introduced in 2007, Amazon still was selling more print copies than they were actual ebook copies most of the time. So in 2019, print sales actually increased while ebooks dropped. And this is continuing to be a trend with e-reading slowly declining in popularity, including those e-reader sales. However, one area that is growing very rapidly, in fact, it's the fastest growing aspect in publishing, is audiobooks. Again, Audible is the primary publisher for audiobooks, which is owned by Amazon. But you can see that the trend of audiobook listening is continuing to increase, and this is especially true in the time of COVID. Print books still are more popular than ebooks or audiobooks, however. And so it just shows that even though people predict the end of a certain type of mass media like print physical books, That's not always the case. And in fact, 37% of US adults say that they only read print books, while a large portion of the population actually reads both. And that I fall into that category where I read both physical books and digital books. So, as I've been saying, there is no indication at this time that digital will truly take over print books, although in certain industries such as references and textbooks, there is growing popularity and need for digital copies of these regularly printed materials. Now, overall, book sales in all formats are trending upward since 2013. 72% of Americans read books regardless of format, and Americans typically read an average of 12 books a year. 65% of us read at least one print book each year, while 25% read an ebook every year, 20% listen to at least one audiobook per year. But 27% of the American population says they haven't consumed a book in any format within the past 12 months, which is slightly concerning, but could be related to some of the demographic factors of reading, such as education, access, and socioeconomics. Now, in terms of COVID-19, the industry really saw sales of books, ebooks, and audiobooks soar. However, the success for the certain types of books and formats of books was not in small bookshops or publishers. A lot of those small shops are having to go out of business because there was not enough foot traffic in the brick and mortars. So really, digital publishers like Amazon were the primary benefactors of that increase in sales. And, you know, if you're guest on, you're probably part of that 27% who haven't consumed books in any formats. So maybe you like pictures more than you like actual reading. So now that you understand a little bit more about how the industry works for publishing, I want you to watch our next video, which is about cultural and societal issues that are represented within books and publishing. Your discussion post for this week will be about gatekeeping of books. And then finally, after the issues in publishing video, you can get a brief introduction to exam 1 and use the exam 1 review worksheet to begin studying for that exam, which will be next week.